Antonio's Story, Legacy of the Fallen, by Charles Olson. Chapter 12, Asphalt Kings. The sun hung low over the Panamanian hills, its heat rising off the cracked asphalt in shimmering waves. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, a scar cutting through the jungle, dry, sun-bleached, and dangerous. Then, from the distance, came the sound. Low at first, a rising growl. It grew louder, sharper, until it exploded into view. Antonio came first. 18 now, lean and carved from muscle and fire, he crouched low over his bike, a brand-new Suzuki GSX-R600, its engine howling like a predator on the hunt. His black helmet gleamed under the sun, and a red bandana trailed behind him like a banner of war. He was confident, ruthless, and alive in a way few ever got to be. Behind him, 4 more bikes tore through the air, engines roaring in unison. The pack moved like wolves, tight, aggressive, fearless. Their leather jackets fluttered behind them like wings, their machines modded and scarred from countless nights on the street. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. This was their church. The road, their God. And Antonio? He was the one leading the sermon. By the time Antonio turned 16, school was ancient history. He didn't drop out. He walked out with swagger. No announcements, no goodbyes. Just one final turn down the stairs and out the front doors. His teachers didn't ask where he went. They'd stopped asking questions a long time ago. The streets became his classroom. And he was a fast learner. What followed was a series of quick rises, small jobs, quick getaways, cash stuffed into duffel bags and glove compartments. Antonio's name started circulating among the other misfits and outcasts of the city. The quiet ones, the hard ones, the desperate ones. They came to him, not as friends, but as something else entirely. Soldiers. Wolves looking for a new alpha. And Antonio? He didn't ride with them. He led them. Late nights found them gathered around fire barrels behind abandoned strip malls and under half-lit highway bridges. They split up the earnings from jobs they'd pulled. Small-time stuff for now. But it was enough to feed them, clothe them, keep them on the move. Antonio's slice went somewhere else entirely. He slid it across the bar at a back alley shop on Avenida Central. The bartender was also the mechanic, and when the money was right, he pulled back a tarp to reveal the bike, a jet-black Suzuki GSX-R600 with crimson accents that caught the light like blood in water. Amado had stood quietly in the corner as Antonio signed the papers, aging behind his dark sunglasses. He said nothing. Just watched. Proud, maybe. Or maybe just afraid of what came next. Antonio called the bike his signature. It wasn't just a machine, it was a statement. He paid for it with cash earned from street races, petty heists, and protection rackets. Every bolt gleamed. Every inch of chrome reflected the face of a boy becoming something dangerous. At night, he worked on it like a surgeon, tightening bolts, cleaning filters, adjusting the chain with delicate precision. The garage smelled of gasoline and sweat. He didn't mind. The Suzuki responded to his touch like it was alive. And when he turned the key, the low growl of the engine sent chills down his spine. Then they rode. Antonio and his crew carved through the streets of Panama City like blades. They ignored red lights, tore down side streets, and left cops spinning in circles. The flashing lights and sirens always faded behind them. Some cheered from the sidewalks, others cowered in doorways. Either way, people noticed. Antonio was a ghost no more. Late one night, the crew crested a hill overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered in the heat of 100,000 lives. Orange, smoky, restless. They pulled over at the cliff's edge. The wind tousled their jackets. The bikes cooled with soft ticks and hisses. Antonio pulled off his helmet. His face had changed. Sharper. Harder. The boy was still there, somewhere, but buried under layers of scars both visible and not. He lit a cigarette and stared out over the city, a ruler eyeing his domain. There was no joy in him. Only fire. He turned to his crew, voice calm but firm.
Mount up, boys.
he said, flicking ash to the dirt.
Let's go out to the lake and lay low for the night.
They didn't question him. They never did. Bayano Lake. The dirt road was narrow, winding through a tunnel of thick jungle, the kind of path that swallowed sound and spit out echoes. The late afternoon sun hung low, draping the treetops in molten gold. From the distance came the sharp, rising roar of engines, motorcycles tearing through the humid stillness like a pack of wolves on the hunt. Antonio led the way, a blur of denim, leather, and heat shimmer, his bike eating the gravel with ease. The others followed close behind, Chaco, Mano, and the rest of the gang, all of them young and burning with restless energy. At the road's end stood a secluded house beside the lake, white cinder-block walls stained with time, a red metal roof faded and rusting in places. It looked out over still, murky water like a half-forgotten memory. The bikes pulled into the yard with a roar that gradually faded as engines were killed, one after another, until only the sounds of cicadas and distant birds filled the air. Antonio swung off his bike, helmet tucked under his arm. He looked at the house like it was an extension of himself, familiar, owned, claimed.
Welcome to paradise, boys,
he said, grinning. Chaco, heavily tattooed and perpetually chewing gum, let out a low whistle.
Damn, this your place?
Antonio shrugged, casual.
It's in the family.
Mano, tall and wiry with twitchy movements like he was built out of live wire, flicked his cigarette away and moved toward the porch.
Where's the old man?
He asked.
Out of town. Won't be back for days.
Antonio tossed the key into the air, caught it without looking, and strode up the steps. He unlocked the door like he had a right to, because he did. The house was modest, plain floors, old walls, sparse furniture, but it was clean, quiet, lived in. A photo of a younger Amado holding a giant fish sat crooked on a dusty shelf. An old leather chair rested by the window like it had waited decades for someone to return to it. The gang filtered in, each finding their own corner. One of them turned on the radio. Another raided the kitchen. Antonio dropped into the leather chair, lit a cigarette, and stared out at the still lake.
This place is tight.
Chaco said from another room.
Peaceful.
Yeah.
Antonio replied.
It's where the old man disappears when he's had enough of people.
He said it with something close to affection, but also distance. Like he understood it, but didn't feel it. The sun was almost gone now, casting a warm glow across the water as it dipped behind the jungle. On the porch, Antonio, Chaco, and Mano sat in a triangle of weathered wood, each with a cheap beer in hand. For a while, they said nothing. Then Chaco broke the silence.
You know, this place reminds me of where I grew up, back in Mexico. My boyhood home.
Antonio glanced over.
Yeah? I knew you came from Mexico, but I don't know much more than that.
Mano answered for him.
His mom brought him here to get away from his dad.
Chaco's gaze drifted out over the water. His voice softened.
We lived in the hills, real quiet, like this. No neighbors, just trees and wind and birds. My mom used to make tortillas in the morning. I'd help my pops cut wood before school.
A beat.
When we left, I didn't think I'd miss it. But this place, this porch, the stillness, makes it feel like I never really left.
He took a sip of beer, eyes glassy but holding it together.
It's peaceful out here,
Antonio said.
Almost makes the rest of the world feel like a dream.
Mano smirked.
Until someone ruins it with a party.
They chuckled quietly, like boys who knew better but would do it anyway. Chaco's smile faded. His eyes stayed locked on the tree line.
I used to think I'd go back someday,
he said.
Now I don't even know if it's still there. I don't know if my dad is alive.
The quiet deepened. Antonio raised his bottle.
To lost places, and the ones that find us again.
To lost places, the others echoed, clinking bottles in the dimming light. Behind them, the porch light flickered on. The night had arrived. Later, out back near the fire pit, the gang circled up with beers in hand. The lake glimmered beneath the moon, the crackle of flames mixing with distant music spilling from inside.
You think the cops even know about this place?
Mono asked, half drunk. Antonio laughed.
Cops? They can't find their own dick in the dark. Nah, this place is buried.
Chaco raised an eyebrow.
Still, man, you better hope Amado never finds out you brought us out here.
He won't.
Antonio said.
And if he does, he'll get over it.
Mono and Chaco exchanged a look. They didn't argue, but something in the air shifted. By midnight, the lake house had turned into a jungle bacchanal. A bonfire raged near the shore, casting long shadows across the clearing. Girls danced, music thumped, smoke and sweat and alcohol thick in the air. Antonio leaned on the railing, a cigarette burning in his fingers, his Suzuki gleaming in the yard like a war prize. Around him, the chaos blurred together. He watched it all like a king over his court, amused, detached, already somewhere else in his mind. Inside, Coke was being chopped on a glass coffee table. One of the girls waved a line toward Antonio.
You want?
He stared at it, long enough for her to grow uncomfortable.
Nah, not tonight.
Then he heard it, raised voices outside. Antonio went out to the porch to investigate. The air felt heavy, thick with humidity and tension. Shadows flickered across the ground as the bonfire roared, its flames licking the night sky like a serpent hungry for destruction. Antonio stood on the porch, his jaw clenched. He watched the crowd, his crowd, as they swayed to the music, beer bottles raised high, eyes wild. Chaco leaned against a tree, sneering at the local kid, his chest puffed out, chin raised. The kid's fists were balled tight, the firelight dancing off his knuckles. "I told you, back the hell off," the kid said, voice trembling. "That's my cousin." Chaco took a long swig of his beer, then spat at the kid's feet.
And? She doesn't look like she wants to go anywhere.
The girl stood frozen, eyes darting between them, trapped like prey between two predators. Antonio's gaze darkened. He stepped forward.
Chaco,
Antonio said, voice low, dangerous.
leave it.
But Chaco only grinned, a wolf's grin.
What? I'm just talking.
Then the kid swung a beer bottle. The bottle shattered against Mono's shoulder, sending shards flying. Mono staggered, cursing, as blood seeped through his shirt. The music swelled, drowning out the shouts as the fight erupted. Antonio was on the kid in a heartbeat, fists flying. The impact sent the boy sprawling into the dirt, his face bloodied, eyes wild. Antonio loomed over him, fists clenched, breath ragged. Behind them, Chaco upended a plastic chair, sending it crashing into the girl's legs. She stumbled back, gasping. A scream pierced the night, sharp, raw, terrified. Mono threw himself at the kid's friend, fists swinging, connecting with bone and flesh. The two went down, rolling through the dirt, bodies slamming against the ground. Chaco laughed, grabbing another bottle, his teeth bared.
Come on, you want some too?
Antonio turned, chest heaving.
Enough!
But the chaos had already spread. Someone was dragged toward the lake, arms flailing, gasping for air as the murky water swallowed them whole. Broken glass glittered like stars in the grass, crunching beneath boots. Music thumped, surreal and endless, a nightmare that wouldn't end. Antonio stood in the center of it all, fists bloodied, eyes dark and empty. Around him, the night spun like a carousel of violence and fire. This was his kingdom now, and it was burning down around him. Much later, silence returned. The fire was dying. Smoke curled lazily into the air. Antonio stood alone at the edge of the lake, shirt soaked in beer, knuckles bloody. He lit a cigarette and stared at the moon's reflection. The house behind him looked like a war zone. Broken furniture, trash everywhere, blood on the floor. You can build a kingdom out of fire, he thought, but don't act surprised when it all burns. Just before dawn. Mist rolled in low over the lake. The party was over. The high had faded. Only the mess remained. Inside, the arguing had begun. Chaco pacing, Mono nursing a busted lip, a girl shivering under a towel.
This is bullshit!
Chaco shouted.
That kid swung first.
Antonio stepped in.
and you lit the fuse.
I didn't touch her.
Doesn't matter. You escalated. You know better.
Chaco snarled.
You don't give me orders, T. I'm not your damn employee.
Silence. Antonio stepped forward.
You want to finish that sentence?
Their eyes locked. Nobody moved.
You think you built this crew?
Antonio's voice was low but venomous.
You think any of them would follow your sorry ass without me?
Chaco muttered.
We didn't come out here to play housemaid.
No.
Antonio said.
We came to blow off steam, and you turned it into a war zone.
He stepped chest to chest.
Now you clean it. All of you.
No one spoke.
This place was loaned to me. If Amado finds out what happened, if there's even a scratch, I'll break both your hands.
Mono nodded.
We got it, T.
Good. Then start with the glass in the kitchen.
The whole crew and remaining guests all followed his order and cleaned up the house and the yard. By the time they were done, the house looked livable again. Barely. The bikes were lined up in the yard. Antonio zipped his jacket and tossed the last bag into an old pickup.
Let's roll.
They mounted up in silence. Antonio slid on his sunglasses, fired up the Suzuki, and tore down the road. The others followed. The jungle gave way to houses. Houses gave way to city. Panama City shimmered on the horizon, blurred by heat and distance. They rode toward it, swallowed by the morning haze.